Before we start this week's episode, we just wanted to take a second to talk about the tragedy that happened yesterday in America. So we record on Wednesdays. And yesterday, Tuesday, 19 kids and two teachers lost their lives at an elementary school in Texas at a school shooting. And we just wanted to kind of, I don't even know what to say at this point, I guess. I don't want to say like thoughts and prayers go out to them because that's what we say every time something happens. And I don't know. So far, there's been 200 mass shootings this year in America, and 27 of them have been in schools. This one has just gotten a lot of coverage because the children were so young. And so we just, I guess, want to put good vibes out there that, things change and, this doesn't happen again, and that the parents can somehow find some way to heal through this time.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine the pain people are going through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's like you don't want to say, our thoughts and prayers, like you said, because you say that for everything.
Yeah. And you say it every time. And it's just like 200 times later, like,
yeah,
so
hopefully something changes.
Yeah. Hopefully. So we just wanted to say, we hope that the families find healing and peace. And we just want to do that top of the show, but I guess we will get started.
I was trying to say, to put it into perspective, the last mass school shooting in Canada was in 1989.
Wow. Yeah, we've already had 27 this year. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. This is the second deadliest school shooting in American history, though.
Wow. Awful. I could not imagine.
You're so pro-life down there. You just got to keep your fucking guns.
Right?
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Start again. Sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine. This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
I'm Jessica.
And I'm Rochelle.
And on this week's episode, I'm bringing you a surprise story.
Ooh.
And that Ashley has been bugging me to tell her about.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Well, no, you haven't specifically asked me, but you've been bugging me to tell you since I told you I wasn't going to tell you.
So. Oh, yeah. I've been bugging her to tell me what she's doing. And she said she wasn't going to tell me. And I said, that's rude.
Well, you were rude. I asked what I should do. And you said your mom. So it's only fair.
Because I'm funny.
Oh, yeah. And Rochelle is going to be telling us stories about the Tower of London.
Ooh.
Yeah. So super exciting.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I'm just going to start. I used nomadsworld.com and all that's interesting. It's not super long, but it's funny.
Okay.
So, if there's one thing humans excel at, it's exterminating other species.
Oh.
This is especially true in Australia, where humans have managed to drive hundreds of native species extinct or onto endangered species lists by accident. Shortly after World War I, Australia's problems began. In that war, Australia had made enormous sacrifices, sending tens of thousands of its young men to perish in the ill-fated Gallipoli campaign. Those that staggered back had difficulty adjusting to civilian life. At the same time, the continent's enormous interior remained shamefully underdeveloped, and it was felt by everybody. In a kind of down-under Homestead Act, the Australian government offered land concessions to veterans on the outskirts of Australia's harsh, unforgiving outback, allowing one problem to solve another. Sorry, I just know it's coming and it's so stupid. Kyle told me to do this story because he heard it on another podcast, and he's like, "You gotta do it." So here we are. So this obviously very quickly led to over farming, over or under irrigation, and overall unsustainable land practices, much as it had in the United States back in Kansas and Oklahoma at that time. So they were doing the same thing, and it was just causing the same results. So this is due to the fact that Australia's interior has an extremely arid and variable environment with frequent droughts. Native animals go to the edges in search of food and water when the interior becomes extremely dry. And because farms have plenty of those two things, the first few waves of rogue emus began drifting in the late 1920s.
Rogue emus, they're mean too, man.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
They had usually appeared in tiny numbers and were easy to chase away from the fields until 1932. Because emus are huge, peaceful herbivores, they were easy to startle in the beginning. They have massive, powerful feet and claws that can disembowel a Komodo dragon up close. Yet if left alone, they will flock at a safe distance from potential threats. They may, however, consume massive volumes of plant matter in a single day. A single emu can strip a garden in a matter of hours, and a large flock of them may slash through a wheat field like a pin-feathered scythe. Ooh. Emus are basically dinosaurs with feathers and beaks, so fucking terrifying. They're almost identical to herbivorous theropods, which were flesh-eating dinosaurs, except for their beaks. Their predecessors never flew, and emus have inherited a calcified pair of arms with bones and claws, but no muscle or tendons to control them.
Ew.
They
I don't know why that grossed me out. I didn't like it.
It is just kind of gross, especially how I'm about to explain it. So they simply dangle like earrings from the animal's chest beneath their feathers.
Oh.
What?
Yeah, they just dangle.
Emu arms.
I follow this TikTok account. It's called I think it's called Hobby Farmer, and she has two emus. She has Karen and Stanley.
I love. Oh,
she is very close to me. She's not.
She?
She's like less than an hour away from me. Yeah, she's like right in this area.
You have to go visit her. And Stanley, for those of you that don't know her, Stanley is this sweet baby angel that cuddles her. He lets her put hats on him. He's so cute. And then Karen is a bitch. She's always trying to attack her, and she just puts her arm out and says no.
Yeah, I mentioned this in a previous episode.
I think her.
I think it was the episode of the glowing wounds from the Civil War.
Oh.
Because one of the guys like charged at the enemies, and then he was shot. It was just kind of like stop. And then I think I mentioned Karen. I think I might have called her Tina, but
I love it.
Yeah, super weird.
I think, and I'm looking it up because I want to make sure I'm right.
Yeah, she's just north of Kingston, so she's like so close to me.
Oh, I love it. No, never mind. I'm not right about my fun fact, so ignore me.
The emus make up for their lack of arms with their legs. On the broad plains, an emu can reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour.
Holy crap.
And could give a kangaroo a run for its money in a kick fight.
Oh, God.
They also peck when they are irritated, which occurs if a person upsets them. Same. A swarm of 20,000 6-foot tall Hungry dinosaurs came from the outback in search of food in the summer of 1932. Worse, the emus walked right through the rabbit barrier that had been set up to keep the rabbits away from the cultivated ground in order to get to the veterans' fields.
Oh no.
These emus also destroyed the farmers' wheat crop, which was infuriating due to the fact that farming in the outback was already super difficult and the government wasn't providing any of their promised subsidies. On top of all of that, wheat prices had also been falling. So something had to be done.
Oh no. Do they kill the emus, Jessica?
Just have to listen.
I'm gonna be so mad at you.
The veterans' initial reaction was expected. When the emu forces advance members arrived, they mistook it for another attack and attempted to drive them away with individual rifle rounds. This worked occasionally, but when more emus arrived from the wild, they became more frantic and difficult to intimidate. Shooting at them didn't help unless the shooter hit the emu square in the head. But it was just as likely to walk away and return to consume the crops. Emus bleed slowly too, just like dinosaurs did. They have enormous gastrointestinal tracts that take up most of their body cavities, similar to herbivores, making a one-shot kill to a crucial organ very unlikely. They also have a huge coat of feathers, similar to birds, that conceals their true body dimensions and makes it even more probable that the shooter will aim too high or too low to deliver an efficient wound. Also, there were thousands of them strewn about. Farmers organized meetings to discuss their difficulties out of desperation. The emus were native to Australia and hence under the Ministry of the Interior's jurisdiction. But earlier experiences with the department had made the veteran farmers hesitant of approaching it for help. In truth, the emus were assaulting the ministry because the government had supported wheat production in 1929 with promises of subsidies that never materialized, and the farmers were still angry about it. Instead, they turned to the Ministry of Defense for assistance, like you do, which was surprisingly responsive to their requests. Under the command of Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery's 7th Heavy Battery, an elite fighting squad of bush commandos was quickly created. This is the stupidest thing ever. Regardless of the cost in lives or material, their duty was to kill or drive out any emus within range of the farmsteads. Meredith knew how to put together a plan. The artillery major acquired 2 Lewis guns and the troops to serve them, with the Western Australian provincial government paying for transportation and the farmers paying for food, accommodation, and ammunition. In October 1932, they piled into vehicles and drove to the Great Emu War's battleground. The operation was first hindered by excessive weather, but by early November, the team was ready for the Great Emu War. Or they thought they were ready.
I feel like I've heard this somewhere before because when you said the Great Emu War, it triggered something in a memory, but I don't know where I would have heard it.
I don't know, because I never heard of it.
Poor baby emus. I hope they all get away safe.
We'll see. The problem was these guys only thought that they would need about 10,000 rounds of ammunition, but the amount of emus was easily double that. It also didn't help that the Lewis guns were finicky to operate, especially in bush country. But despite these obstacles, Meredith and his team were very confident that they would be successful. So dumb. So confident, in fact, that they hired a cinematographer from Fox Movietone to oversee the upcoming hunt.
Why? Nobody wants to see animals die. Well, I guess back in the day they probably did.
Yeah.
Didn't care.
Oh, exactly. Back in the 1930s, that was sport, right?
Yeah,
So,
they didn't care.
like, I would assume emus are like equivalent to bear and deer here.
Yeah.
So on November 2nd, near Campion, the Great Emu War saw its first engagement. Scouts in advance detected a small flock of about 50 emus hiding in the trees a short distance from the main road. As any sniper knows, the cover makes getting a clear shot tough to kind of impossible. So Meredith instructed his men to ambush the emus. The emus scattered and ran in disorderly patterns all over the region, occasionally resting to feed or rest in the shade, instead of doing what any other animal would do and just decently run toward the machine gun nests. But I feel like this actually makes the emu like pretty superior.
Yeah.
And it's also my strategy in video games. I just run around wildly and like
and
just
hope
randomly
nobody can get you.
yeah, and I just like randomly shoot out like randomly. I don't usually aim. I just kind of like and hope I hit something, just like they did.
So what you're saying is you're basically an emu.
Yes. Yeah, my gamer name for Xbox used to be Mother of Dragoons.
Dragoons.
Also pterodactyl. Because I make a pterodactyl noise.
That's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
What? That noise came from you?
That was an amazing pterodactyl impression. I was not prepared. And I have headphones on, but it was great.
You're welcome. Oh my god. Every single bird stayed out of range of the machine guns the entire time.
Good for them.
None of them even got close enough to be shot by accident. One of the Lewis gunners did manage to get his weapon near enough for a barrage after hours of effort, but it had no discernible effect. Major Meredith later stated in the after-action report that a number of emus were killed, but he didn't specify how many, because there was probably none. The birds eventually scurried away from the kill zone after this. The Great Emu War's next engagement occurred 2 days later on November 4th. Nearly 1,000 emus congregated to drink near a nearby dam, which was exactly the kind of concentration that Lewis guns needed. These weapons were crucial in trench fighting during the World War I, and tens of thousands of German men were likely killed by charging a Lewis nest. Meredith sent his gunners out into the vehicles in preparation for an ambush. They'd definitely take out the entire flock this time. The soldiers came quietly and discovered that the reports were, if anything, understated. They were greeted by a massive gathering. They sighted their first targets after carefully setting up their gun. They only brought one gun and kept the others in reserve behind the lines, which I think is dumb if you're gonna like go all out. Like, I mean, good for the emus, but like,
yeah,
be smart. Especially with what happens next. The Lewis gun began to buzz, and then it abruptly stopped.
Oh no.
Only a dozen bullets had left, and then it jammed.
Mm.
The terrified birds began their usual running in all directions defense as the gun crew hurriedly field stripped the machine gun to clear the jam. But by the time the gun was ready to go again, there were no emus.
Good for them.
Yeah. Hundreds of birds were killed in the first week of fighting, according to Major Meredith's after action report. However, at least one source states it was less than 50. Meredith also considered reporting that his unit had no casualties. So, who do we believe? Because even the guy himself is contradicting himself.
Wait, he had no casualties of like his men?
I think no casualties of the birds.
Oh, I was like, why would his men die? What's going on? But
because honestly, everything I read, like, it didn't make any sense because they basically were always saying like the birds got away, or the weapons that they used weren't really effective, and the anatomy of the bird was too complicated, right, to get a good shot.
Good for the birdie. I mean, I feel bad for the farmers, but I don't like to hear about animals dying.
Yeah, same. Meredith had been pushed to his breaking point by his failure to put up a decent kill total at the time he made the report. Part of the problem was that the birds were so swift that no matter how many were gathered in one location, they'd scatter faster than any man could run after the first few rounds. Meredith ordered a Lewis gun to be installed on the back of a truck to keep up with the fleeing birds at one point, but it didn't work because a truck that can go 65 miles per hour on a paved road can only go about 20 miles per hour across rugged terrain, and a machine gun on a static mount can't be stabilized or shot accurately. Worse, because a single truck can only chase one bird at a time, the hundreds of others will invariably flee the vehicle, virtually always making a clean getaway. That's why I'm thinking there were actually no casualties.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The Australian Parliament suspended operations and withdrew the military on November 8th. They recommitted the men to the Great Emu War a month later under increasing pressure from the regional government. On November 12th, Major Meredith launched his second onslaught against the emus. Meredith's men claimed up to 100 emus every week by the end of the month, despite initial results being no better than before. So, who knows at this point?
So he just lied the whole time, basically.
That's kind of like what I'm thinking, but yeah. I mean, we'll never know, right?
Right.
Major Meredith claimed in his final report that his troops fired 9,860 rounds of ammunition and killed 986 emus, a ratio of exactly 10 shots per dead bird, which doesn't make any sense. No. On December 10th, he and his team were forced to leave the field. So, back to kind of the 10 shots per dead bird thing. That story matches that of a farmer who hit an emu with his truck in December of that year, and he discovered 9 bullets in the body of the dead bird, which had been there for at least 2 weeks before the bird was killed by the truck.
Whoa.
So. That bird got shot 9 times. It was still just like hanging out.
Well, he was dead on the side of the road.
Oh, I thought he hit him with his car and that's what killed him.
No, he said that it had been there for at least 2 weeks before the bird was killed by the truck.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought the bullets had been there at least 2 weeks.
But the bird had like 9 bullets in it. Like,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So super duper. The Great Emu War appears to have taught Australia a lesson. When the farmers requested military assistance again in 1934, they were denied, as they had been in 1943 and 1948. Instead of enforcing emu culling, the government put aside funds for bounties, allowing farmers to do the onerous work of finding and shooting the emu menace themselves. This was significantly more effective because nearly 58,000 bounties were claimed in 1934 alone. So very sad to the emus.
Yeah.
When reports of the Great Emu War reached London, environmentalists were outraged at what they viewed as the indiscriminate slaughter of rare emus. The fact that there were tens of thousands of them and that none of them ever ate a London environmentalist's livelihood went unmentioned in the numerous articles decrying the barbaric attacks on the peaceful emu. The men involved in this onslaught never really lived down the role that they played in it. An Australian MP joked that the government should commission a medal for the effort, only for it to be proposed that all the medals go to the emus.
Oh no.
Which I love. The laughter faded over time and life returned to normal. In 1994, another emu cull was carried out, this time by volunteers who put the creatures out of their suffering when they were dying of thirst during a drought, thus conserving critical water for the hundreds of thousands of other emus still living in the interior. And peace has finally been achieved. And that is my story on the Great Emu War.
I don't know if I liked it.
I loved it.
I liked it because it was ridiculous.
So ridiculous.
I'm not gonna lie, when you first started telling it, I was like, is Jessica just gonna tell us a story about how this like army went out and like killed all these like birds? This is so sad. Why would she do this?
No, because it was funny.
But I like that they like beat the military. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, and I like that even like the Australian MP is like, oh, give the birds a medal. Yeah. Anyways, thanks Kyle for the recommendation. It was a great story I found. So
I just don't like that they died in the end, so many of them.
I know, but like all animals, sometimes there's an overpopulation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if they're messing with someone's livelihood as well, right? So
I guess.
So Rochelle, tell us all about your story.
Okay.
Love ghosties. I watched this there's a TikTok account and she lives in the Tower of London and she tells all of her spooky stories. It's really cool. And all
Yeah,
the
I'm
history.
so jealous of anybody that lives there. Like, because if
Yeah.
you're not, like, obviously you have to be like a yeoman warder or a descendant, like daughter or son of one to live there.
Oh.
Really? I was wondering how she was living there.
Yeah, I think her dad is a yeoman warder.
What
What is that?
I'll get to it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So today I'm about to talk about another place that I've been to and absolutely loved exploring, the Tower of London.
Ooh.
One of my favorite things about the city of London in general, although I would have to say it's probably my favorite city ever, is that the history of the city is still very prominent there. It's almost like you fell into a history book. The Tower of London sits right along the Thames River, and much to the surprise of many tourists, consists of more than just a tower. It's a huge castle with many buildings, a moat, and many large black ravens who guard the grounds.
Ooh.
So I have to tell you this story that I was told by a friend of mine who still works at Kingston Pen Tours. There is, like, of course, 4 large walls surrounding the penitentiary.
No walls, no kidding. Sorry.
And then there is a sally port door on the north side that like opens up to the street, and so cars can come in and come out. And you press a button and like the gates open, and you press a button and the gates close.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, a family of ravens have recently made their nest on one of the buildings.
Oh.
And as kind of a joke, everybody that worked there would shout like "nevermore" at them, like Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Until one day they saw a raven like perched on top of the gates, and it was like riding the gates up and riding the gates down, like every time somebody would come in. And then one of the times the gates opened, the raven got squished.
Oh, no.
And so nevermore are the ravens.
Oh no.
But basically, Dave, who told me the story, went and like picked it up and like carried it out to the very, very back where the rec yard is and like placed it down as like an offering to the rest of the ravens.
Oh.
And yeah, anyways, now they just like squawk even more, but thought that was a funny story.
Poor
You
dumb
thought
dumb
my
Raven.
story was sad.
Anyways, William the Conqueror first built a mighty stone tower at the center of his London fortress in the 1070s.
Oh wow.
Now, nearly 1,000 years later, the tower still has the capacity to fascinate and horrify those who visit. As protector of the crown jewels, yes, those worn by kings and queens of the past, and our current Queen Elizabeth, home of the yeoman warders, the official guards and tour guides of the tower, and its legendary guardians, the pampered ravens. Now the tower attracts over 3 million visitors a year. Within the walls of the tower, the ceremony of the keys and other traditions live on, as do the ghost stories and terrible tales of torture and execution.
Ooh.
As the most secure castle in the land, the tower guarded royal possessions and even the royal family in times of war and rebellion. But for 500 years, monarchs also used the tower as a surprisingly luxurious palace. As luxurious as you could get in the time before running water and electricity. Throughout history, the tower has also been a visible symbol of awe and fear. Kings and queens imprisoned their rivals and enemies within the walls. The stories of prisoners, rich and poor, still haunt the tower. So here's a little bit of a timeline. In the 1070s, William the Conqueror, fresh from his victory, but nervous of rebellion, began to build a massive stone fortress in London to defend and proclaim his royal power. Nothing like it had ever been seen in England before. William intended that his mighty castle not only dominate the skyline, but also the hearts and minds of the defeated Londoners. The tower took around 20 years to build. Masons arrived from Normandy, bringing with them stone from Caen in France. Most of the actual labor was provided by Englishmen.
That's crazy. There's a castle in France that took like much longer to build, and the original owner died before it was even finally built. Like it took hundreds of years for it to be finally built.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. I toured that one.
Chambord?
Yeah.
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 Isn't that cool?
It's gorgeous.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Someone walked into me in the bathroom there because like the door wasn't latching, and then someone walked in. And
Oh,
There's
no.
like quite close to us, but I think it is technically on the state side, is Bolt Castle.
yeah.
And similar story, like he had built it for his wife, but she passed away before it was complete.
Wasn't that like
Aw.
Casa Loma as well?
I think Casa Loma has a similar story. Yeah.
Yeah, Casa Loma's gorgeous.
Mhm.
Ugh. I just wanna
But
go to
it
some
doesn't, it's not
castles.
haunted. Like there is absolutely no stories of like people actually dying there.
Oh, really?
Casa
Yeah.
Loma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which sucks because it is cool.
Yeah, it is spooky.
Throughout history, the tower has been adapted and developed to defend and control the nation. Henry III and Edward I expanded William's fortress, adding huge curtain walls with a series of smaller towers and enlarging the moat. They also transformed the tower into England's largest and strongest concentric castle, with one ring of defenses inside the other. Inside, the medieval kings built magnificent royal lodgings. Kings and queens used the tower in times of trouble to protect their possessions and themselves. Arms and armor were made, tested, and stored there until the 1800s. The tower also controlled the supply of the nation's money. All coins of the realm were made at the Tower Mint from the reign of Edward I until 1810. Kings and queens also locked away their valuables and jewels at the tower, and even today the crown jewels are protected by a garrison of soldiers. The Tower of London has also been the infamous setting for stories of royal tragedy and death. During the War of the Roses, Henry VI was murdered here in 1471, and later the children of his great rival, Edward, whatever the number IV is.
4.
4. The
Yeah.
Princess in the Tower. I thought I had gone through and like gave myself little like
Notes.
of what all of the numbers were, but apparently I missed this one. The princes in the tower vanished within its walls in 1483. In 1674, two skeletons were unearthed at the tower.
Oh.
The bones were re-examined in 1933 and proved to be those of two boys aged about 12 and 10.
I heard about that.
Exactly the same age as the princes when they disappeared.
Yeah.
When I visited, and I guess it was 2016, they were like doing work and more like excavations on the staircase where they found them.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm. The famous yeoman warders, recognized as symbols of the tower all over the world, have been here for centuries. They were originally part of the yeomen of the guard, the monarch's personal bodyguard who traveled with him. Henry VIII decreed that some of them would stay and guard the tower permanently. Today, the yeoman warders, or the beefeaters, you might have heard them called, guard the visitors, but still carry out ceremonial duties such as unlocking and locking the tower every day and the ceremony of the keys.
Aww.
They wear their red state dress uniforms for important occasions at the tower, and also for special events such as firing off the huge cannon on the wharf known as the gun salutes. Also, that is how you live inside the Tower of London. So if your father or mother, as I now think they do allow women to be beefeaters, quite recently.
That's so cool.
But yeah, you would live in an apartment on the grounds.
That's really cool. Is that the same, and you might get to this, but is that the same tower where Queen Mary put Mary of Scots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's where a lot of people were imprisoned.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Medieval kings and queens lived in luxurious apartments at the tower. They worshipped in the Chapel Royal and kept a menagerie of exotic animals, which lasted until the 19th century, and welcomed foreign rulers at magnificent ceremonial occasions. Life and death at the tower. Although long since vanished, there was once a splendid royal palace to the south of the White Tower. The White Tower is that main middle building. Usually when you Google Tower of London, that's the one that comes up.
It's not actually white, is it?
No, it's like a tan brick.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Henry VIII modernized the rooms inside in preparation for the coronation of his new bride, Anne Boleyn, in 1533.
Aww.
She and the king feasted here in splendor the night before Anne processed in triumph through the city of London to Westminster Abbey. 3 years later, Anne was back at the tower, this time accused of adultery and treason. She was held in the same luxurious lodgings before being executed by sword on Tower Green. What were you going to say, Ashley?
Oh, I said she was also convicted of incest, even though I don't think any of that ever happened, but yeah.
No.
Anything to kill his wives.
Mm-hmm.
For over 800 years, men and women have arrived at the tower uncertain of their fate. Some stayed for only a few days, others many years. During the Tudor age, the tower became the most important state prison in the country. Anyone thought to be a threat to national security came here. The future Elizabeth I, Lady Jane Grey, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Guy Fawkes were all sent to the tower.
That's so cool.
Even in the 20th century, German spies were brought here and shot.
What?
The chapel is perhaps best known as being the burial place of some of the most famous tower prisoners. This includes the three queens of England, wow. Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Jane Grey, all of whom were executed within the tower in the 16th century.
Just so sad.
Boleyn and Howard being two of Henry's 6 wives. Henry VIII's wives were accused of adultery and treason. Lady Jane Grey was an unfortunate pawn in a plot to replace Mary I and was executed for high treason in 1554 at only 17 years old. In 1876, when the chapel was destroyed, the remains unearthed in the chancel, including those of Anne Boleyn, were reburied beneath a marble pavement, inscribed with their names and coat of arms. The Ravens! One of the most famous legends at the tower surrounds the ravens. The story goes that should the ravens leave the tower, both it and the kingdom will fall.
Oh.
7 ravens live at the tower today. or at the tower at any one time
Mhm.
and are cared for by a dedicated yeoman warder known as the Raven Master.
Let it be the Raven Master.
Oh, yeah.
The Tower of London is still one of the world's leading tourist attractions and a World Heritage Site, attracting visitors from all over the world, like me. And when the gates are locked and all the visitors have gone, the tower embraces a thriving community within its walls. The Tower of London is still home to the yeoman warders and their families, the resident governor, and a garrison of soldiers. There is a doctor and a chaplain, and even a pub within the walls.
Do you know how many people live there?
I don't know for sure.
Oh, okay.
And I think it was constantly changing depending on like how much family you have.
Gotcha.
living
Yeah,
with
that makes
you.
sense. Yeah.
The Tower of London's history as a prison has always held the most fascination involving the castle. Between the year 1100
Oh, it's so early.
and 1952, some 8,000 people were incarcerated within the tower walls for crimes ranging from treason and conspiracy to murder, debt, and sorcery.
I
Ooh.
can't even like fathom that year.
I know.
But you know
right?
what was surprising to me is I thought it would be a lot more than just 8,000 in that span of time, you know? But I guess it was probably saved for like the more
Exactly,
like
yeah. But it's funny because like in Canada we're like something's from the 1800s. How ancient.
Yeah.
Whereas like in England it's like from the 10s.
The
Yeah.
10s.
Or even earlier. It's wild.
When was
Yeah.
Canada founded?
Canada became a country in
I think it was like 1864.
1867.
Oh, I was close.
Oh.
Yeah, July 1st, 1867.
I was so
Aw.
close. Oh, man. I'm a bad Canadian.
All good. One of the most notorious mysteries involved the princes in the tower. Upon the death of Edward IV in 1483, his son and heir Edward was just 12 years old. So he appointed his brother Richard, the future Richard III, as Lord Protector.
He proctored all the exams in the country.
Richard wasted no time in placing the boy and his younger brother Richard in the tower. For their protection, he said.
Of course.
What happened next has been the subject of intense debate ever since. It's now widely accepted that sometime during the autumn of the year, the two princes were quietly murdered.
Oh.
We still don't know who did it. The prime suspect for many years is suspected to be Richard III, who had invalidated his nephew's claim to the throne and had himself crowned king in July 1483.
Seems legit.
Yeah.
But there were others with a vested interest in getting the princes out of the way. The two princes had apparently disappeared without a trace, but in 1674, a remarkable discovery was made at the tower. The then King Charles II ordered the demolition of what remained of the royal palace to the south of the White Tower, including a turret that had once contained a privy staircase leading into St. John's Chapel. Beneath the foundations of the staircase, the workmen were astonished to find a wooden chest containing two skeletons.
Skeletons for the proctor.
They were clearly the bones of children, and their height coincided with the age of the two princes when they disappeared. Charles II eventually arranged for their reburial in Westminster Abbey. They lie there still, with a brief interruption in 1933 when a re-examination provided compelling evidence that they were the two princes.
Oh, sweet babies.
The controversy surrounding their death was reignited by the discovery of Richard III's skeleton in Leicestershire in 2012 in a parking lot, and shows no sign of anyone losing interest in the case anytime soon.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember when that happened? I remember very vividly when that happened.
I do,
Yeah.
and I think that's why I knew about the skeletons and the boys because of that.
Yeah. The ghosts.
Yay. Ghosts.
Of course, I couldn't share with you a story like this without mentioning anything spooky. There is absolutely no way a historic castle/fortress such as this isn't haunted. The tower is said to be home to no less than 13 ghosts.
Oh.
Compare that to Fort Henry's 5, and I'm instantly jealous that I live and work in baby country, Canada.
Accurate.
Here are the 13 known ghosts at the tower, from least to most frightening, in my opinion.
Ooh, okay.
13. The ghost of a bear.
Oh, I want a ghost bear.
Henry III housed his menagerie of wild animals at the Tower of London, including gift of either lions or leopards from the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II in 1235, pumas, tigers, jackals, an elephant from France, and even a polar bear were to follow. Visitors came to the tower to see the creatures, with the bear baiting going on to become popular pastime in 16th and 17th century London. And it seems the horrors of this pastime are still heard today, with the ghost of a bear, which is said to appear from behind the door of the jewel room, perhaps a spectral guard to the crown of jewels.
It's so cute.
The ghost of a black bear is also reported to have appeared near the Martin Tower in 1816. 12. The monk's footsteps.
Yeah. No,
If you
thanks.
visit the Tower of London, listen out for the sound of sandals slapping against stone floors, reported to be from the steps of a ghostly monk.
Ew.
I want to go back to this ghost bear because I would be so happy if I was haunted by a ghost bear.
Hence why I put it at least frightening.
Yeah, I want one I want a ghost bear so bad.
Okay, 11. Henry VI. Imprisoned in the Wakefield Tower, the Tower of London, Henry VI was murdered at the altar in the King's private chapel in 1471, close to midnight. Henry's ghost is believed to haunt the Wakefield Tower, appearing on the stroke of midnight. That's it. He just
Oh.
appears.
Okay.
Oh, I thought there was going to be more than that.
No. 10. Sir Walter Raleigh.
Hmm.
Sent to the tower no less than 3 times. Explorer Sir Walter Raleigh was imprisoned by both Elizabeth I and James I, spending over 13 years in the Bloody Tower during one confinement and attempting suicide.
Ugh.
Sir Walter Raleigh's last imprisonment at the Tower of London, the Beauchamp Tower, took place in 1603 before he was beheaded outside the Palace of Westminster. Number 9, the White Figure.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
The Tower of London is protected by the Yeoman Warders, nicknamed the Beefeaters. In 1864, Captain J.D. Dundas observed a yeoman attempting to charge a whitish female figure with his bayonet. Chillingly, the apparition appeared in the courtyard where Anne Boleyn was beheaded. Then we have number 8, the Faceless Young Woman.
Ew.
Ew, I hate that.
In 1957, Welsh Guardsman Johns was on sentry duty at the Salt Tower when he encountered a shapeless form with the face of a young woman. Perhaps one of the many women who suffered a terrible fate at the Tower of London. But again, just a simple apparition, nothing too scary there.
Gross.
7, Anne Boleyn's procession.
Oh, yeah.
As ghost stories go, there are a few as spooky and as tragic as this one. When Henry VIII broke with the Roman Catholic Church to set aside his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and become the supreme head of the new church, the Church of England, Anne Boleyn became Henry's second wife. Just 2 years later, Anne was accused of adultery and taken as a prisoner by barge along the River Thames to the Tower of London to the infamous Traitor's Gate.
Yeah.
What's funny about the Traitor's Gate is it's now almost completely underneath the Thames River.
Oh, really?
The water has risen that much.
Oh, wow.
Anne was beheaded on the Tower Green and laid to rest in the Chapel Royal of St. Peter and Vincula, the parish church of the Tower of London. Some 340 years later, a soldier reported seeing a light burning in the closed chapel. After climbing a window to look within, the soldier is said to have seen a procession of knights and ladies led by a headless Anne Boleyn.
Ugh. Put your head back on, Anne. Jeez.
They took it from her.
There are children around.
And probably children there when she got her head chopped off.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Do you know, fun fact, they did not even have a casket made for her. So when they took her away, they had to put her in like a wooden, like,
Aw,
yeah,
Yeah.
that's mean.
yeah.
I mean, it's Henry VIII.
And Henry was like, wash my hands of that woman. She's done.
On to the next. Jane Seymour. Let's go.
Jane
Aw.
Seymour.
We like her.
We do.
So Jane Seymour was the only one that she died after giving birth, so she wasn't murdered. So
Yeah.
Which is nice. And then Catherine Parr, of course, being the only one to survive him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 6, Lady Jane Grey.
Ooh.
Known as the English queen with the shortest reign, Protestant Lady Jane Grey became queen after the death of King Edward I, son of King Henry VIII. Edward named Lady Jane Grey as his heir in his last will over his half-sister Mary. Upon in royal power games, the king's protector John Dudley had arranged for 16-year-old Lady Jane Grey to marry his son, Lord Guilford Dudley. On Edward's death on the 6th of July, 1553, Lady Jane Grey became queen, a title she was to hold for just 9 days before council decreed that Catholic Mary was true ruler of England. Lady Jane Grey and her husband Dudley were executed on the infamous Tower Green in 1554. The white figure of Jane is said to haunt the battlements of the Tower of London to this day. There's stories that said she asked, when she was being held in the tower the night before execution, she asked for a chopping block be placed in her room so she could practice placing her head on the block.
Yeah, I heard that. That's pitiful. I mean, you think about it. She's 16. How sad.
Yeah.
I mean, back then that's 43, but still. Bad.
Still insane.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Number 5, Arabella Stuart. An oft-repeated ghost sighting of the Tower of London is that of Arabella Stuart, cousin to Elizabeth I. Arabella was imprisoned by James I for marrying William Seymour, nephew of Lady Jane Grey, without royal consent. Seeing this match as a possible threat to the throne, James placed Arabella under arrest at the Tower, where she either refused to eat or was purposely starved. Arabella's ghost is said to stalk the Queen's house.
Aw, poor girl.
Number 4, The Lost Princes, of course. On the death of Edward IV, Edward's young son, 12-year-old Edward, became King Edward V under the protection of his uncle, the Duke of Gloucester. Wanting to take the crown for his own, the Duke of Gloucester imprisoned Edward and his younger brother Richard in the Tower of London. Their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, took sanctuary at Westminster Abbey. After declaring young Edward illegitimate, the Duke of Gloucester became King Richard III, and Edward and Richard were never seen again, believed to be murdered at the order of their uncle. The bones, of course, were later found beneath a staircase.
So sad.
Number 3, Guy Fawkes, probably one of the most recent ghosts. Oddly enough, 1605, still one of the more recent ghosts.
Okay.
Guy Fawkes was taken to the Tower of London after his part in a plot to assassinate James I at the Parliament in 1605. Prison in the Queen's house, Guy Fawkes was subjected to intense torture, likely on the rack in the White Tower dungeons, which were closed when I was there, and I was so annoyed by that.
That's really irritating. I'd be pissed.
I know. Also, it is said that you can hear his screams echoing through the tower at night.
Hate that.
We then have number 2, Margaret Pole. Like Anne Boleyn, the beheading of Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, took place on Tower Green, which lies to the west of the White Tower. Brought to the scaffold by Henry VIII for the crime of being the mother of Cardinal Pole, who opposed Henry's self-created position as supreme head of the Church of England, Margaret Pole was 67 at the time of her death.
Oh, leave the old lady alone.
Honestly.
It gets worse. It gets way worse. Eyewitnesses say the executioner on the fateful day in 1541 was a wretched and blundering youth who, unable to perform a clean execution with his axe, instead hacked at Margaret Pole's head and shoulders. They say that the eternal scream echoes through the tower today.
Oh my God.
So there was a hanging that happened in Kingston in 1838 during some of the Upper Canada rebellions. And the man was Martin Woodruff. And unfortunately, he had an executioner who was wretched and a blundering youth. He was a young rookie executioner. He tied the noose incorrectly and dropped Martin to hang. He did not die.
Oh no.
He was dangling in front of about 200 people. that came to watch.
Great.
If he had been an experienced executioner, they said that in that case, they would have just gone down and like tugged on their legs very sharply to like snap their neck.
Mhm.
But this guy, no. He reeled him back up to the top of the gallows by the rope and dropped him again.
Oh my God.
And he actually dropped him 4 times
Oh my
before
God.
he finally
Jeez.
died.
I feel like on the third time, that's just like fate. Let the guy live.
Yeah.
Well, even after the 4th time, they cut him down and they said that he kicked him very sharply in the chest a few times just to make sure.
Oh, like let the guy die in peace.
And number 1, the spookiest ghost, the Tower of London, the nameless thing.
Ew, I love it.
Lastly is the nameless thing, a petrifying spirit which follows the guards of the tower as they walk the beat from the River Sally's portal entrance. And that is it.
Oh, so creepy. I hate it.
And finally, I have the spookiest tale from somebody that actually experienced it.
Oh, okay.
Edmund Lenthal Swifty was the keeper of the crown jewels between 1814 and 1852. He lived inside the Tower of London with his family. He recorded a truly spooky experience. In his own words, it happened on a Saturday night in October at about the witching hour.
Oh.
He was in the Jewel House, the doleful prison of Anne Boleyn. The windows were closed, the curtains were pulled over, and the room was lit by a couple of candles. His family were seated within. Suddenly, something very odd happened. His wife looked up and exclaimed, "Good God, what is that?" I looked up and saw a cylindrical figure, like glass tubes, seemingly about the thickness of my arm. It was hovering between the ceiling and the table. Its contents appeared to be a dense fluid, white and pale azure, like the gathering of a summer cloud, incessantly rolling and mingling with the cylinder. This lasted about 2 minutes. Then it began slowly to move before my sister-in-law. Then, following the oblong shape of the table before my son and myself, passing behind my wife. It paused for a moment over her right shoulder. Instantly, she crouched down, and with both hands covering her shoulder, she shrieked out, "Oh, Christ, it has seized me!" Even now, while writing, I feel the fresh horror of that moment.
Oh my gosh.
I love
How
it.
spooky
Yeah.
is that? And that is my story
Loved it.
of the
So
Tower
cool.
of London.
Very
So
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
Have either of you been?
No.
I've never been to England.
Oh, you should go.
Yeah. It's on my list of places I want to go. But yeah, I've never been.
I loved it.
Yeah.
You need a long time to like really kind of go through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you are planning on visiting the Tower of London, plan like to go for the whole day, maybe even more.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back. I just didn't have time to go back and
Gotcha.
do more, but yeah.
Yeah, there's just such cool history to see there. Cool. Do you guys have any jokes?
I do.
Okay. Good, because I didn't want to look any up.
They're from the new Ghostbusters movie.
Oh.
Okay. Well, what do you call a dead polar bear?
What?
A dead polar bear. What do you call it?
I know I said what? What do you call
Oh, anything you want. It can't hear you.
it?
And I have another one.
Okay.
What do a cigarette and a hamster have in common?
I don't know.
They're both completely harmless until you put one in your mouth and set it on fire.
Oh no.
What?
There you go. I was so excited when I heard this. I was like, oh yeah, I have to share.
Not quite as
I
good as
have
my
an
cat
emu
one,
joke.
but
Hold
go
on, I have
ahead,
an emu
Michelle.
joke. What's the best way to avoid getting bird flu?
I don't know.
Get immunized.
Yeah.
If you want more of us lovely ladies, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
And if you would like to rate and review us, you can do so by going on to Apple Podcast or Spotify.
And if you've ever been to the Tower of London, or you've seen a ghost at the Tower of London, or you live in the Tower of London, tell us about it, please.
Please.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Please.
Well, we look forward to bringing you 2 new stories next week.
Bye.